So hello, everyone. My name is Vince Trotter, and I work with UC Cooperative Extension in Marin County. Here I have two roles. One is as our Sustainable Ag Coordinator, and in that role, I basically help farmers and ranchers to implement new ag practices or start new enterprises. Basically, anything that has the potential to extend the viability of farming and ranching in our county, that kind of falls under this umbrella of sustainability. And then in a nice little dovetail with that, as agricultural ombuds, I am a neutral educational resource to help farmers and ranchers understand and navigate all the different rules, regulations, licenses, permits that come into play as a commercial ag operator. I tell folks that they can ask me anything, and then I'll help them know where the sort of the rules of the road are so they can make an educated decision for themselves. So you can imagine that new enterprises, rules and regulations, these are really closely knit together when we talk about meat processing and meat marketing. So I love having the chance to come and join this group and add a little bit maybe to the discussion. Really appreciate the invitation to be here today. So with that, let me go ahead and jump in. And before I dig into sort of the logistics of bringing meat to market, I did want to just go down a little bit of an aside, the business side. Whenever I talk to somebody about launching a new enterprise, and this is definitely true when I talk to folks around niche meat marketing, I suggest that they sit down and do two things. One is conduct a little bit of a market analysis, and the other to do some financial projections. And both of those sound awful. I know I can hear everybody cringing, but these are back of the napkin type things. They don't have to be super involved, but they're really important exercises for you to think through the road ahead. The market analysis, main thing is, who is it that you envision yourself selling to? Is it chefs and restaurants? Are you looking to put meat in the hands of retailers? Or do you want to be selling cuts to individual families? And are those families the kind of folks that pack a freezer with a ton of meat and work their way through it over the months? Or are you interested in slinging, special cuts and other products in ones and twos? So think about who you envision yourself selling to, and then do a little bit of digging about where those folks are. Where are they doing their shopping? Is it farmers markets? Are they available to you only on the other end of a distributor? Give some serious thought to how you're going to get a hold of them. What is the pricing that they're currently paying, and what kind of quantity are they typically buying in? This can be as simple as making some phone calls. Maybe you envision yourself selling to your neighbors. Well, get some of those neighbors on the phone and get a little bit of information about their buying habits. If you think you want to sell at a farmer's market, go hang out at the farmer's market and see what people are buying and in what quantities and what are the prices. Do a little bit of digging so you know the market that you're fitting into. And then run some financial projections. And by this, I simply mean add up all the expenses that are going to be associated with either buying in a feeder animal of some kind, or if you're calving or farrowing, the costs associated with raising up that animal from birth, feed costs, basically all the cash outlays they're going to get you from the start of the cycle all the way through to processing and ultimately sales of that animal. And then add up what you think you can make from it. And that's where some of your market research is going to be helpful, because you have a sense of how much money and who's going to be buying it and what they're going to be paying. And I really recommend doing a very simple cash flow where you take a cycle, which is to say, again, the start of the process where an animal is born or you've bought in an animal to your property, all the way through to the sale of the finished product. And at least on a month-to-month basis, whether it's or weeks. If we're talking poultry, maybe it's a 9-week process. But if we're talking steer, maybe you've got a 24-month process. Where is cash going out the door? And then when is revenue going to come in? And what that's going to do for you is give you a sense of how this business is going to play out over time, where money is going to be flying out your wallet and where it's potentially going to be coming in. All of these things are just projections, okay? And you're going to get some of it wrong. You're going to run a cycle of animals or maybe 2 cycles, and you're going to learn from it and you're going to correct these. But start with a picture that's got a little bit of information in it, and then proceed along your way. So that's my little bit of a business aside. And as you're doing those things, it's good to consider a few other questions like, why am I doing this? Am I trying to make a ton of money because I'm not getting enough from my property currently and I need to close some gaps? Or am I just looking for a break-even thing because I love working with the animals and working with the land? And as long as it's not costing me anything, it's good by me. All of these questions here are really important ones to answer, again, in getting a picture of the road ahead and just sort of preparing yourself before you're launching into this new enterprise. So let's get into the logistics of bringing meat to market. And the first 2 pathways I want to describe are for livestock. So these are true for cattle, hogs, sheep, and goats, all right? And I have some other ones for poultry, but for a moment, let's dwell on livestock. And we're going to talk about 2 pathways: selling your animals for meat, and the second one, selling meat from your animals. Very important distinction between these 2. So I'm going to break them both down, starting with selling meat from your animal. And I'll break that further into 4 steps. This is the classic model, right? One day you've got animals on pasture, and the other you're slinging pork loin and sausage and ground beef to your customers, all right? So you want to sell meat products. So you're going to start step 1 by getting on the phone. And interestingly enough, what I counsel is the first thing you do is book a date with what's called a cut and wrap facility, okay? The place that's going to take a carcass and turn that into cuts like chops and ground and sausage or bacon. You need a date at a facility that can take the carcass that comes out of a slaughter plant and turn it into packaged, labeled product. It's a real bottleneck in the industry, and you don't want to exit a plant with a carcass that's got nowhere to go. And sometimes these guys are the ones that are really going to be hard for you to nail down. So start there. And then find a USDA inspected slaughter plant that does what we call private label slaughter. Basically, they will slaughter somebody else's animal as a service to them, as opposed to an integrated slaughterhouse that's doing their own animals to turn around for their own product. You need a place that conducts slaughter as a service. So you've got a cut and wrap date, and you're going to now book a date at the slaughter plant. And generally, you're going to need a date that's anywhere from 2 to 10 days prior to your cut and wrap date. You can't really leave it at the slaughter plant for very long, but there's usually a little bit of wiggle room. When you're talking to that USDA plant, they're going to want to know, what is your cut and wrap date? How many animals you're going to bring? And then they're going to talk through their delivery logistics. Maybe they have all the animals come in the night before. Maybe they need you to bring it in the morning of. You're going to work all that out. Generally, that's about all the slaughter plant wants to know. If you're bringing in an old bull or a 350-pound sow, something really outside of the market norms, you want to alert them to that in advance. But otherwise, not a ton of information at that point. One thing I have on the slide here that I didn't mention is just when you're booking your date for cut and wrap, one of the things you're going to have to establish early is your label and your label information. And usually a cut and wrap facility knows the steps to go through and the information to get on that label. But all those labels have to be approved by the USDA. So you want to have that figured out in advance so that the cut and wrap facility can put your label, a market ready label, on your product. So That's another reason why you need to start with the cut and wrap side of things. But let's imagine you've done both of those. You hang up your phone, you've got your dates. Now you're getting ready to transport your animal to the plant. Generally, you're going to need to withhold feed for about 12 hours. Some ranchers, if they're trucking animals in the morning, they load it into the trailer the night before, make sure it's got water, but that's the surest way to make sure it's not, on forage or getting any feed. And then the next morning, they're ready to go. When you get to the plant, if you're bringing in cattle, you're going to need to have what's called a yellow slip and possibly a blue slip. The yellow slip is just a slip that comes from the Bureau of Livestock Identification, and you need it every time you transport cattle in the state. And you're going to need to turn that slip over to the slaughter plant. The blue slip is something, if you, for example, buy that animal at auction, or if you've gotten it off of a neighbor, that's something that records the change of ownership, and you may need that as well. They're also going to want to establish the age of the animal. Most plants do that through a dental examination, but if you have birth records, if those animals are born on the ranch, and it's really important to you to prove that that animal is a certain age, in particular less than 30 months, because of the rules around mad cow disease and some of the ways they process an old animal versus a young animal, then you want to have those records with you. When you get to the plant, they're probably going to weigh that animal, and then they're going to send you straight over to the office so you can file your paperwork and you can pay for the slaughter up front. Then they're going to send that carcass over to the cut and wrap facility of your choice, where they're going to break it down according to your specifications. If you want a certain amount of grind, or you like your chops a certain thickness. And then when that's done, you will pick up that product. And there are a few rules around how you can receive that inspected, packaged meat. Gone are the days when they, throw boxes of beef in the back of a hatchback. You need to generally have some kind of means of keeping it cold, keeping it free from what's called adulteration, basically keep it from contamination or from spoiling. And you need to show that you're cleaning it regularly. And then you're going to take that product either back to the ranch, maybe you store it in a freezer there, or you might work with a commercial locker plant. Some folks do that too. And then they do all their deliveries and their sales out of that locker plant. And at this point now, you've got an inventory of meat that you can sell virtually anywhere. You can sell it to restaurants, to retailers. You can ship it across the country, or sell it down the road at a farmer's market. That's the beauty of having sent this through an inspected pipeline, is that you have a lot of options for where you sell it. If you are selling wholesale, just a little note, the freezer or the refrigerator on the ranch where you're keeping that meat does have to be registered with the USDA. But if it's all going direct to consumers, it doesn't. Probably needs to be inspected by your local health department, but the USDA is not interested in the facility at that point. So that is selling meat from your animals. The other pipeline is to sell your animals to then be converted into meat. And this is essentially a primarily uninspected pipeline. And the rules say that you can pass animals through an uninspected process as long as it's really just owners processing meat for their own consumption. And that's why the language here is really important. You are selling an animal to someone who now becomes the owner of the animal, and they can process it and have it turned into meat for their own consumption. And none of that has to pass through a USDA inspected facility. So let me break it down into 4 steps. First thing you're going to do is find 1, 2, 6, 20 people who are interested in buying a portion of a live animal. And it really, there's no limit. You could make as many people owners as you like. The important thing is that you're going to sell it to them on some basis other than weight. There's very strict rules about selling things by weight, which include needing to have a scale and a certain licensure. So the easiest thing to do is to sell them simply a percentage of the animal at a flat rate, and then give them a sense of how much meat is liable to come from that. I use a table like this that illustrates how much meat a live animal of a certain weight is likely to turn into. So a 250-pound hog is probably going to turn into roughly 190 pounds on the hook, hanging weight. But then once you take out the bones, break it into cuts, trim some of the fat, you're down to about 130 pounds of meat. So you could sell someone a whole animal at a flat rate and tell them they're liable to get about 130 pounds of meat. As long as you're not charging them $10 a pound for 130 pounds, $1,300, as long as you're not making that sort of transaction, you're fine. So you record the sale, write down all the customers and some important information connecting the new owners to the animal that they now own. And if you're working with cattle, you're actually going to bring in the Bureau of Livestock Identification, the brand inspector, to sort of put the seal of approval on that change of ownership. That's that blue slip that we mentioned earlier. And at that point, once you set this down in your record, you no longer own the animal. You're just sort of stewarding it on behalf of the owner or the owners. You can arrange for a mobile slaughter operator, or what the state of California calls an MSO, to come out, kill that animal on the ranch, and then transport it back to your local butcher shop, what's called a custom exempt butcher shop, where they're then going to match the carcass with the owner, right? Because you've given them the record of sales so they can see which animal belongs to which people. And they're going to find out, do those folks want a lot of ground meat, a lot of chops, how thick, all those good things. And on the other end, then those customers are going to come down to that butcher shop and pick up their cuts. Again, they didn't buy meat. They bought an animal that somebody helped them turn into meat. And so that meat can't be sold onwards from there. It's just for them to consume at home. Two pathways for bringing livestock from the pasture to the plate as a small enterprise. I had information about poultry, but I know I'm out of time. So instead, let me just jump to here and just say, I'm happy to answer other questions about folks here today, and later on we can get into poultry and anything else. So you've got my information there. At that, I will hand it back to Julie.